Hello and welcome to this OpenText Filr video on how to install the content editor. My name's Robin Redgrave. I'm a solutions consultant based out of the UK. Before you begin, there are a few things that you need to have. The first of which is the actual appliance itself. You normally would download this from the SLT portal, but you may have got it from somewhere else like Marketplace or it being given to you. The appliance itself is going to be called Content Editor.x86 and then some numbers and an extension. Depending on which hypervisor you're running, depends on which extension you should be using. So for instance, with VMware, you need to be using the OVA version of the appliance. Some other bits you need are the online update code. This allows you to download updates and patches for the appliance. Typically you'd get that from the SLD, though you can also use an SMT server to patch the appliance if you wanted to. And something I generally recommend is having a certificate as well that's been minted by a proper certificate authority. A self-minted certificate is created as part of the install, but some things like iOS devices and Apple Macs need to have a proper certificate rather than a self-minted certificate in order to work. Having imported the appliance into your hypervisor, there are a few things that need to be done. There are a couple of disks that need to be added. First, there's the VA storage disk, which has the appliance configuration on. And then there's the var disk, which is used for putting log files on. Typically, these disks don't need to be that big because there's no permanent data that's going to be stored on them. But you can expand those disks after installation if need be. So just make sure that when you're installing, you've got the content editor on the correct network. And normally I'd say keep it on the same subnet as where your Filr appliances are. By default, it ships with, I think, 16 gigabytes of memory. That should be sufficient for most proof of concepts or small environments, but do consider increasing that if need be. And you can, of course, have multiple content editors in your environment with a load balancer in front of them, though there's some special things you need to do to the load balancer to get it to work properly. And that will just give you horizontal scaling there for your online editing. Also, something you can do, I generally leave them at the default just for a POC, but you can obviously increase the number of processors. So let's install the appliance. You need to boot it. And I'll jump ahead a few times during this just to speed up the video. And that's taken about a minute and a half to get to this. And the first thing that's been displayed is the license agreement. Before you just blindly accept this, just make sure that option in the top right is configured for your keyboard. I'm not actually running a US keyboard, I've got a UK keyboard, so I'll just change it to that. If you don't do that, you may have problems with passwords if the keyboard is set on the wrong layout. And then I'll just click on accept. Next, we get prompted, as we did with the Filr appliance, for 2 passwords. Normally, I set these at the same, though if you want to keep the root user and the virtual appliance administrator users separate, then obviously do consider using separate passwords there, but I'll just set these the same for the moment. Set the NTP server for whatever you use in your environment. I'm just going to leave that at the default, and then I'm just going to set this to be for the UK and click next. Host name, in this case I'm going to call this content editor. My demo.biz, and we'll have a static IP address,
and the IP address is going to be 172.17.2.80, going to be 255.255.255.0. Gateway is going to be 172.17.2.1. DNS server is 172.17.2.251, and let's just use 8.8.8.8 as the another DNS server, and then I'll just click next, and then we get asked for which disks we're using. So I'm just going to use first of those disks that we added, and I can change the file system type there. I tend to leave it on the default of ext4. Then we get asked for the log data disk, which is going to be the second of those disks that we added, and then configure. And that took about 2.5 minutes to complete. And that's the content editor installed. In the next video, we'll go through how to actually configure it. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this useful.